And now we'll invite to the stage for a keynote speech Mr. Colin Stewart, representative of the Secretary General and head of the United Nations Peacekeeping Force here in Cyprus, as well as Deputy Special Advisor of the Secretary General on Cyprus. He should have some very interesting things to say. Mr. Stewart.
Dear colleagues, it's a pleasure to be here again this year. For most of the past year, there has not been much tangible change with respect to the Cyprus issue. But very recently, we've started to see some hopeful signs. The crisis we had last month in Pila was a serious one. For the first time in many years, there was an assault on UN peacekeepers. But out of this crisis, in the end, cooler heads prevailed, and ultimately space was created for serious discussions with both sides to find a way to address everyone's concerns and to come up with a formula that would be a positive outcome for all. It was not easy. There is a deep distrust that exists between officials on the two sides, a distrust that causes each side to question the motives behind every concern raised by the other. But we did, in fact, succeed in having very constructive dialogue, and I am optimistic that we will very soon have a consensus on the way forward. I started off by saying that there were some hopeful signs. I think that confronting a difficult issue such as Pila and having the two sides agree to sit down, in this case, each side with the United Nations, to seek common ground and actually make substantial progress, that's at least a bit of a hopeful sign for Cyprus. Ultimately, this is exactly what will be required to reach any settlement on the Cyprus issue. Grappling with difficult issues, taking a constructive approach, and making compromises. Turning a negative into a positive in Pila will build a bit of confidence, and greater mutual trust and confidence is a necessary step on the path to a comprehensive settlement. This is why the United Nations peacekeeping and good offices roles are so intimately linked. Peacekeeping is a tool to manage conflict and prevent its escalation. It is all about trying to preserve the space for political solution, which can only come through dialogue and compromise. Our role in Pila is a good example of that. As Nikos Christodoulidis has said, the Pila crisis is a reminder of the volatility of the status quo, of the risks and dangers of the continuation of this status quo, and of the imperative need for a comprehensive solution. I could not agree more. That's why the second positive sign I want to mention this morning is so important. There have been some indications that finally there may be some real movement on the question of appointing a United Nations envoy. That would be a real game changer. The road back to negotiations remains a long and convoluted one, but having a dedicated envoy to begin a sustained conversation would be a crucial first step. As a third positive sign, I'd like to highlight the extraordinary bicommunal event last week put on jointly between the Turkish Cypriot and Greek Cypriot municipalities of Famagusta. This wonderful and spontaneous outpouring of intercommunal friendship and fraternity was a poignant reminder that ordinary Cypriots from both communities want a resolution. Year after year, polling by the United Nations confirms that strong majorities of both communities want the Cyprus issue solved through a negotiated, mutually acceptable settlement. These signs that I call hopeful contrast sharply with the situation of recent years and suggest that we may now be on the verge of a course reversal. If my optimism is well-founded, and we start to see positive movement soon, that will certainly be welcome news. Next year, the UN Peacekeeping Mission in Cyprus, UNFICYP, and the Secretary General's good offices will be marking 60 years in Cyprus. That's right, in 1964, only 4 years into the independence of Cyprus, the situation on the island was such that the United Nations Security Council felt it had to intervene. and for the subsequent 60 years, the UN has been trying to keep the peace and to help the parties arrive at a resolution to the Cyprus problem. A resolution that is long, long overdue. But even if things take a long-awaited turn for the better, and I certainly hope they will, there will still be a lot of hard work ahead. Navigating the road towards a comprehensive settlement will require building favorable conditions through a series of trust and confidence-building measures that build and sustain positive momentum among the leaders, among the many officials on the two sides, and among the public. And a society that has been separated for 50 years has a lot of work to do to prepare for renewed cohabitation. Ties between the two communities need to be meaningfully rebuilt through sustained interactions across society and economic actors. Interaction breaks down barriers and fosters greater understanding, which in turn removes some of the psychological barriers to finding common ground. Expanding trade and business links, in particular, can make the idea of a settlement seem real, and thus pave the way for a political solution. As I said at this same podium 1 year ago, interdependence is the glue that can hold the island together. Rather than waiting to see what happens, Cypriots need to invest in the future they would like to see. If you want a reunified island, taking steps right now to break down the separation, integrate the two communities and their economies, and begin reunifying the island in practice will help make that vision a reality. Leaving part of the island with no choice but to rely on a third country for everything only deepens the separation and undermines the chances of a mutually acceptable settlement. Confidence-building measures or gestures that strengthen intra-island integration, especially those with economic impact, take Cypriots a step closer to the type of future they want and should not require a quid pro quo reciprocation. The benefits they deliver are far more important. They pave the way to a mutually agreeable settlement. Speaking of confidence building, I must salute the work of the many dedicated Cypriot women and men from both sides who have for many years worked quietly behind the scenes on the 12 technical committees established by the leaders to improve the livelihoods of all Cypriots. In the context of the prolonged political deadlock that we've been living through, these committees have provided an avenue through which positive steps are taken and tangible things are achieved on a daily basis. From intra-island health cooperation to keeping the crossing points functioning, from protecting cultural heritage to planning cooperation on crisis management, and from managing cooperation on criminal matters to coordinating broadcast frequencies. With financial support from the European Union, the work these committees do builds a foundation for future talks. We try to ensure that the committees are protected and insulated from larger political tensions. However, I regret to say that the political differences prevailing between the sides in the last few months has impacted upon the excellent work of these committees. Education is of vital importance for promoting understanding and reconciliation. But in Cyprus, education has traditionally been unhelpful in this regard by reinforcing negative stereotypes and propagating intolerant narratives. Roadblocks facing the Technical Committee on Education have effectively suspended the important work that was being done in this committee. If there's to be any hope for a durable peace in the future for Cyprus, the crucial bicommunal work on education must resume as a matter of priority. Even though we are not yet at the point of restarting talks, it is never too early to start thinking about how to approach and organize such talks to ensure the greatest chances of success. In this regard, I look forward to the panel discussion on process design this afternoon. The theme of this year's forum, transparency, in case you think I forgot, in the context of a political process, is a very important source of confidence for society in general, particularly through the inclusion in the process of a representative cross-section of the population. Collective experience has shown that when transparency is prioritized in peace talks, it not only fosters inclusivity and effectiveness in crafting agreements, but also enhances public trust, accountability, and the potential for broader support, ultimately strengthening the foundations of a lasting peace. The two leaders have been repeatedly called upon by the Security Council and the Secretary General to promote inclusivity in their negotiating teams and to engage and involve women, minorities, young people, and persons with disabilities in discussions related to a shared future on the island and incorporate these views accordingly. Last year, the leaders responded by signing a commitment to ensure that all future delegations to talks on the Cyprus issue will comprise at least 1/3 women. The technical committees are doing quite well with respect to gender ratios, but we have not yet been as successful in bringing on board young people, which would be in line with the United Nations Youth, Peace and Security agenda. Transparency helps reduce suspicions, build trust, and ensure that the process is accountable. Meanwhile, inclusion ensures that the perspectives, needs, and concerns of various groups are considered, increasing the likelihood of reaching a more comprehensive and sustainable peace agreement. Greater engagement with civil society is key in all of this. The United Nations conducts a range of outreach activities in Cyprus, and the feedback we receive from participants points to great interest in engaging with political leadership on issues of importance and demonstrates the value of more inclusivity. The session this afternoon on realizing meaningful youth participation and achieving SDGs in Cyprus, led by our Good Offices mission, will touch on some of these issues. Finally, while transparency and inclusion are crucial to the success of any comprehensive settlement process, this does not in any way diminish the importance of leadership, especially in a leader-led process such as we have here in Cyprus. Leadership is fundamental in building and maintaining support for a settlement agreement, but leadership is especially critical for the hard political decisions and compromises that have to be made for any agreement to be reached. As the Secretary General said last week in his speech to the General Assembly, politics is compromise, diplomacy is compromise, effective leadership is compromise. A successful peace process does not see one side getting its way at the expense of the other. Such outcomes are not sustainable. Durable peace agreements are equitable and are perceived by both sides to be acceptable. No one gets everything they want, but everyone can live with the outcome because the prize is not the agreement itself, but the results of the agreement. In other words, the peaceful coexistence which follows. In view of the hopeful signs that I've identified, let's hope that the coming period turns a new page for Cyprus and that future Cypriots, the future that Cypriots have been dreaming of for generations, will become a reality. Thank you very much.